Good evening. Welcome to the latest webinar of the Adam Smith Institute. Tonight we are very privileged to welcome Dr. Rainer Zitelmann, who's written 23 books. He holds doctorates in history and sociology, and he's worked in book publishing and the newspaper industry. He founded his own company 20 years ago, and today is a widely respected analyst and commentator on capitalism and the wealth-creating process. Now, while we work on getting Rainer online, I will point out that his latest book is The Rich in Public Opinion, which examines attitudes to the rich in various countries. Previously, Dr. Zitelmann has written Dare to be Different and Grow Rich, about the entrepreneurs and those who went against the grain and made it against the odds. He's written The Power of Capitalism. I'm not going to go through all 23 of his books. I will content myself with saying, welcome, Dr. Zitelmann. It's a great pleasure to have you with us tonight.
Hi, thank you.
The format of this is I'm going to ask you a few questions, and once we've got into it, we're going to take questions from some of the people following this live. So let's get straight on with it. Look, as I pointed out, you've written several books about rich and successful people. Can you say, what is it about rich and successful people that interests you?
Yes, I think there are so many people who want to grow rich and want to be successful, but science, academic research has so very little to say us about it. I found that it is easier to find a doctoral dissertation about the heartbeat of a pig during a 100-meter race, or about a life of rare insects, as to find something about how to get rich. And so I wrote my second doctoral dissertation thesis about the psychology of wealthy people, about their personality traits. And then I think there's another point. I found that there's almost nothing about prejudice and stereotypes against wealthy people. This was the latest book, The Rich in Public Opinion. There are thousands of books, prejudice against gay people, against black people, against women, even against overweight people, against poor people. But there was not one book, prejudice against rich people. And I think there are a lot of stereotypes and prejudice. And so this was the reason why I commissioned a poll in 4 countries and wrote about in this book.
Now then, your new book, The Rich in Public Opinion, it's about what people in different countries think about rich people. Now, without going into too much detail, how did you set about finding out the different attitudes people have about the rich in different countries?
Yes, I commissioned a poll by Ipsos Mori, that is a well-respected poll research institute. And we had dozens of questions in these 4 countries, in the United States, France, UK, and Germany. And in the end, we saw that there were two different groups. We called them the envious and the non-envious people. I give you only 3 examples for question to show you only example. There was, for example, one statement that represented to the interviews: when I hear about a millionaire who made a risky business decision and lost a lot of money because of it, I think it serves him right. What do you think about this? Or another question: I would favor drastically reducing manager salaries and redistributing the money more evenly among the employees, even if that would mean that the employees would get only a few more pounds or dollars per month. And the last one: I think it would be fair to increase taxes substantially for millionaires, even if I would not benefit from it personally. And you see, there are a lot of definitions about envy, and I have a very narrow definition. My definition is, you don't want to close the gap between you and rich and successful people, that you improve your own situation. But for you, it's much more important for envious people to make life worse for the rich people, even if you don't benefit from it. And so we had this dozens of questions, and then we had this 3 different groups: the envious, non-envious, and then there was a group in the middle. We called them the ambivalent.
Now, following on from that, does the attitude of the Anglo-American people, the Anglosphere, does it differ very much from the average attitude of people in continental Europe?
Absolutely. I can tell you exactly, because we calculated something that we called the social envy coefficient. And this means the ratio between envious and non-envious people in a country. For example, if it is 1, it would mean that we have as many envious as non-envious people. This is, for example, in Germany. We had most envious people in France. To make it easier, the higher the number, the more envious people you find in a country. In France, it was 1.21. In Germany, 1.97. And then was United States with 0.42 and UK with 0.37. And in United States and UK, it was almost identical. And so you see that you British people and Americans have much more in common as you have with people in continental Europe, like especially French people or German people.
And both of us more tolerant and more accepting of shall we say, the right of people to become wealthy.
Yes, yes. Yeah, yes, but I have to add something, what is very important. It's true general for United States, but there's a huge difference between age groups in United States. So with it's only true for older Americans. For young Americans, they are very, very anti-rich and very envious. They have very, very negative attitude toward rich people. There's a big difference between the generations. I'll tell you only one example, only one question. We had one statement, we confronted the interviews with the statement, rich people are good in making money, but they are usually no decent people. And for example, for young people under 30, 40% agreed and only 23% disagreed. From older people, it was the opposite in the United States. Only 15% agreed and 50% disagreed. And so it was with all other questions. So with and this difference between the generations, it was not in UK and in Germany and France. If there was a difference, it was the other way around. So it means that young people were a little bit more positive to rich people than the older people. It's only in the United States.
Now, do you think the media have a big role to play? I mean, in determining what people think about wealthy people, how significant is the attitude that the media, particularly the print media, play?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. There's the book to tell you to the audience has three parts, and one part is about the media, an in-depth analysis of media, print media like newspaper, but as well, this was a very interesting chapter for me, how rich people are portrayed in Hollywood movies. There's one chapter, and we analyzed more than 500 Hollywood movies, 43 a more in-depth analysis, and the result was that rich people are portrayed in a very negative way with as people who are intelligent on the one hand, but on the other hand with bad moral. And so I think media have an influence, but I think this is not the only reason. I think even without media, you would have the phenomenon of envy and negative stereotypes against rich people. Media make this stronger or give it a direction maybe, but I think this is not the only reason. I think it would be without media.
In Hollywood movies, rich people make very good villains. I'm completely captivated by them, and I suppose it's many people portrayed as villains in Hollywood movies actually have people aspiring to be like them, notably Gordon Gekko in Wall Street, who was supposed to be the bad guy. But all of the young people started wearing red braces and trying to emulate Gordon Gekko. So sometimes it misfires. May I just pause for a moment? Can I just remind people of the title of this book, The Rich in Public Opinion? It's on Amazon, I take it, yes?
Yes, yes, thank you. Maybe, by the way, I tell you a funny thing, by the way. I had an interview with a leftist journalist in Germany, but I liked him and he liked me. And in the end of the interview, he said to me, Mr. Zitelmann, please be honest for a moment. Let's tell us the truth. I think the super rich people are exactly as we know from these James Bond movies. They want all the power in the world. And then I asked him, only please one question. How many super rich people do you know in person? He said, I don't know one. And so you see, there's a difference between you and me, because I wrote my second doctoral dissertation about rich people, and I know a lot of them in person, and you know them from the Hollywood movies. There's a difference between you and me.
Now, look, I was speaking now about the UK, where it seems very much true that people don't mind footballers and pop stars commanding high salaries, but they're less happy about when this happens to business executives. Why do you think this happens?
I don't know whether it's 100% true. Yes, I think you are right. We had one question in our book. It was, who do you think deserves to be rich? And we had different groups. And there are more people who think that, for example, football players or sportsmen deserve to be rich, because maybe it's easier to see what they are doing. They don't understand what the CEO of a company does. But what was very funny, if we look only to the group of the envious people, they thought that lottery players deserve to be rich. And I think this is a very interesting thing, because on the one hand, they say the CEO, the managers, they don't work long and hard enough to earn their money. But on the other hand, they tell you lottery player, they deserve to be rich. And I have an explanation for this, because you know, with lottery, it's only luck. And luck is a good explanation for people who are not successful, because if you think that maybe these people are more intelligent, more hardworking, or more creative, this is not so good for your self-conscious. But if you can say, oh, he's only lucky, so then everything is okay. You don't have to feel inferior to someone.
Indeed. One of the most pervasive economic fallacies is called the zero-sum game, in which people suppose that gains by some must necessarily involve losses by others. In other words, they think the supply of wealth is fixed. I think people think wealth is a zero-sum game. Not everyone, but large numbers assume that those who've gained it must have involved losses to some other people. Do you think that's part of the explanation why the rich are held in such low esteem?
Absolutely. I think this is the core conviction of all socialists, is the zero-sum belief that they think the rich are only rich because they have take it away from the poor people. And we saw it in our research that all this we need only one question. We need only the zero-sum question. We had one zero-sum question. If I see how the person answers the zero-sum question, I can predict all the other answers. So this is the core of the conviction. And I want to add something to the zero-sum belief, because I have a lot of discussion with people about this. And I tell them always, only very short, one example to prove it absolutely wrong. You know, in China, 1981, 88% of the Chinese people lived in extreme poverty. Today, it's less than 1%, from 88 to less than 1%. In the same time, the number of billionaires increased so much in China as in no other country of the world. Today, we have so many billionaires in China. Only in the United States, we have more. And if zero-sum thinking would be true, you can't explain it. And you can't explain why in the last decades, the number of billionaires worldwide increased from 500 to 2,000. At the same time, the number of poor people was reduced from 1 to 0.1 billion people. So I think it's totally wrong, but you're absolutely right. The zero-sum thinking is it's the core conviction of all people who hate rich people and of all envious people, and the core conviction of socialist ideology.
Yeah, okay. In your book, Dare to be Different and Grow Rich, and of course in The Wealth Elite, where you write about what rich people are like, you look at people who've made it against the odds. People who worked hard, run through, basically took the knocks that came along the way, persevered, and made it through. I spotted a personality pattern emerging from the rich people you described. What did you determine were the chief character traits that made these people stand out?
I think it's very important. I call them non-conformists. People, a lot of them, they love it to swim against the tide or to swim against the stream. They really love it, not only in business. And I think it's logical. If you do the same as everyone else, you can't get super rich with hundreds of millions or even billions. You have to be different. You have to do things different, and to do things different, you have to think different. And so I think it's something that a lot of rich people have in common, that a lot of them really enjoy swimming against the stream, and there are some, maybe they don't enjoy it, but they don't care about what other people say. And this is, I think, one of the very important, you're right, personality traits from rich people.
Yeah. Is there anything we might do within the educational system to make it easier for people to develop these character traits? I mean, one gets the impression sometimes that there's conformist pressure against such people. Is there anything we might do within schools or universities to alleviate that?
Yes, I have only, to be honest, I have only one idea, because I think teachers can't tell them what they should learn, because you know what is a teacher, does a teacher do? First he goes to school, then he goes to university, and then he goes back to school. So I think it's not a perfect role model for entrepreneurship. But what I would do, you should send every week entrepreneurs to school to tell young people about what they did, how they founded their company, and so on. I think this would be absolutely great. Yes. Right,
Rainer, should that be? I mean, we've had someone called Jamie following us says, should business studies be you know, a fundamental requirement in our curriculum, and should we have successful business people going into schools, you know, as part of that program? You said yes, obviously, yes.
Absolutely. I think this is very important. I think it wouldn't help if you have it only in the curriculum and you tell the teachers that they should tell people something about economy and entrepreneurship, because in the end they will tell them a lot of nonsense, I'm sure. The only way is to send the entrepreneurs to school every week, another entrepreneur who to tell young people how he did it. And so this would be great. This would change so much.
Yeah, in The Power of Capitalism, you point out that it's done more than any other idea in history to lift people all over the world out of poverty and deprivation. You mentioned what happened in China when they abandoned socialism, the dramatic lifting of people out of that subsistence. Now, the fact is that many people these days don't actually understand that, and they oppose capitalism. I mean, what's gone wrong? Why, given that the facts are so clear, has the message not got across? What can we do to improve it?
I think we have to be a little bit maybe self-critical. I mean the advocates of capitalism or maybe libertarian ideas. I met a lot of people who discuss in a very theoretical and abstract way. They have always quotes from Hayek and Mises and Milton Friedman, and I like them all. It's great, but I think for most of the people it's too much theory. Yes, it's necessary, but you have to have much easier messages. Like I try to do it in my book about the power of capitalism. You know, for example, Ludwig von Mises, he wrote his great book against socialism 100 years ago, and it was great because he showed why socialism can't work. But today we have 100 years later, and we don't have to have a theory about it, because you only should see what happened in praxis, in reality. And I think one reason is even if you tell people the facts, and the problem is at school, no one tells them the facts. To tell you this, I have lectures all over the world about this topic. And I ask always young people, for example, whether they have heard about the greatest socialist experiment in history, the so-called Great Leap Forward from Mao Zedong at the end of the 50s, where 45 million people died. And almost no one heard about it at school. Almost no one heard about it at school. And I think it's very important to tell people about this. But then there's something else. I want to recommend another book, not written by me, but by a colleague of you that you know, Christian Niemitz, Socialism, yes. A Failed Idea That Never Dies. It's such a great book, and I think you should read both. You should read The Power of Capitalism by me and his book, then you understand everything, because it's always the same story. After socialist experiment failed, they tell you always, no, it wasn't real socialism, but next time it will work. Yes, and the problem is, what I don't understand, maybe to add this before we come to our next question, a problem is the people, they compare not real life examples, like I do it in my book, North Korea, South Korea, West Germany, East Germany, China before and after Mao, but they compare a theory in a book with real capitalism. And this is like if I would compare your marriage, maybe, for example, with a book, with a love story in a book with a perfect love, and then I say your marriage is bad because I compare it here in the book. Everything is so perfect, and so this is what socialists do always. They don't compare real life.
In my book about logical fallacies, called How to Win Every Argument, I actually call that comparing apples with pears. They want you to compare the apples of theoretical socialism with the pears of capitalism as it's been in practice, with all its flaws and its errors. And so if we're comparing pure theory with real-world practicality, no, we either do apples with apples or pears with pears.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely.
Now, I loved your suggestion in that intellectual class only values intelligence that can be communicated in lectures and in books. And they don't spot the practical intelligence that successful business people have, that they have learned in the real world. I think that's a beautiful description of the two types of intelligence. But does it mean that academia, given that they get all of their ideas from lectures and books, is always going to be left-wing, and it's always going to indoctrinate students with false ideas, and it's always going to undervalue the achievements of people who've got real-world intelligence?
No, not always. You see, if it would be always, there would be a Milton Friedman, Hayek, Mises. But I think for the majority, it's absolutely right. Yes, and it's not only about leftist ideology. Even if you look at right-wing intellectuals, you see that very often they are anti-capitalist. It's not only about leftist intellectuals. You find it with right-wing people as well. And the reason is, I think, because they don't understand this, what we call implicit knowledge, or another word is intuition or gut feeling, what is a result of implicit learning. They understand only what we call explicit learning or academic learning or book knowledge. And they think, because this is what they learned, the more books you read, the higher you should be in society. And if there's someone, maybe it was neighbor at their school who was always bad at school and later read not so many books, maybe he didn't even study. And in the end, he has the bigger house, the nicer car, and what is the biggest problem, the prettier girl or woman as well. Then they think, oh, capitalism is wrong, something with the market has to be wrong, because if it would be correct, I should be there where he is now.
Now, I want to take a couple of questions that have come in from our followers. One asks us to repeat the name of the book and the author about socialism that you recommended. It is, of course, Christian Niemitz. And if you look up the website of the Institute of Economic Affairs, you'll find Christian Niemitz that is there, and the book about socialism, I think, can be bought there. So it's the Institute of Economic Affairs, and the author is Christian Niemitz. Now, here's a question for you, Rainer. Andrew Sutcliffe asks, do you think it's inevitable in the next decade that either the US or the UK will vote for a real socialist government? They say there's a whole generation of young Westerners growing up, they have not learned the hard lessons of what socialism has done in practice. And is it going to happen? And if we're going to stop it, how do we stop it?
Yes, a difficult question. I think it's the problem is bigger in United States as it is in UK with young people. I know as well in UK there are a lot of leftist young people, but I think it's very extreme in the United States. And I think one reason is I read a research some weeks ago that there are 12 leftist professors at a university in the United States to only one who's not leftist. And from the assistant professors, it's now 48-1 in the United States. I think even in Germany and I think in the UK, it's bad you have much more leftists, but it's not so extreme as it is in the United States. I don't know whether it will happen, but sure, there is a real danger. And I think it will not be socialism exactly the same way as we knew it in the Soviet Union or something like this. But what you see even today, that we have a tendency everywhere, even in Germany, for example, that, for example, in the energy industry, that it was restructured to a kind of planned economy, or the housing industry, or now they do it as well in the automotive industry, what is very dangerous for Germany because it's very important industry. So and this is not with a socialist government that we have there, but it's with Angela Merkel here in Germany. And I think there's a real danger, and the question is what you can do against it. I have not such a optimistic view, to be honest. We can do something against it, but not. It will not work from one year to the next year, because what we see now is a result of decades. That it started in the 60s, with Marxist theories at the universities, with what you called Frankfurt School and all this Marcuse, Adorno, and with these guys. It started there, and I think it starts always with books, with discussion in universities. Later it goes in the media to the political parties, and in the end it's in the economy. And to put all this back, I think the most important thing, we should learn from the leftist people, because they did it right, and we should study more thoroughly how they did it, and then we should do it in a similar way. And so I think it's so very important what you did do there with your Adam Smith Institute and other libertarian institute. It starts always with books and in the mind and with discussions as we have, but we should be not so theoretical. This is very important. We should have much easier messages, and we should be much better with public relation and tell people easy stories. I think sometimes you make it too complicated.
Now, do you think that for young people, the appeal of socialism is principally emotional, or is it intellectual, or is it a mixture of both?
If you are young, I can say it because I was very left-wing when I was young. I was a Maoist. I founded a Maoist group at my school when I was 13 years old, yes? And so I understand you dream from a perfect society and you want to change the world. And I think it's okay so, but sure, later on in life it changes with a lot of people. But if it seems for young people that we are only like conservative defender of what is now of the reality, then it's very unlikely that we convince them. We have to be more with a rebellious spirit. Even how we look, sometimes I see this conservative people who defend market economy and they have their old blue suede, their fat belly, and then you know, as they look, yes, from the first impression, young people can't be convinced about them. I have a lot of lectures at university with young people. I come there with my T-shirt. I love capitalism, my T-shirt, and I'm very offensive. I'm not defensive. So, and I think we have to change something in the way we communicate with the people about our ideas.
I just want to say that I have a T-shirt that says, oh, it's 5 years old now. It says neoliberal and proud of it.
Yeah, good. Yes,
I sometimes wear that when I'm lecturing. Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Look, some of the ideas that come from your books, to me, they have echoes of Ayn Rand. Did her outlook have any influence on you?
To be honest, I read not so much from her. I think only one book, and I liked it. It was about intellectuals. This book. To be honest, I'm more. I read some books from all this, you know, libertarian heroes from a little bit from Hayek and from Milton Friedman, but I was not so much influenced by these ideas. I'm more a historian. First, I don't like any kind of utopia, even not a libertarian utopia. I don't like socialist utopia, and I'm as a historian, I like more the facts. I look what happened in history, what worked and what not, and I would not replace a socialist utopia with a libertarian utopia, because I think every time you want to construct something like a perfect society, in the end, the result will be bad for people. So maybe I have there a little bit a different approach to others. No,
that's neoliberal. You know, let society emerge as a result of the decisions freely made by free peoples. No, there's nothing utopian about that. Look, we've got a question here from Linda Nye. She says there's nothing wrong with entrepreneurship, but it should not be confused with simple wealth acquisition. I think that's a good point. Entrepreneurship, she says, is a wonderful thing, creative and dynamic. Should we, in fact, kind of make a distinction between those who create wealth with new ideas, innovations, bringing products and services that didn't exist before, with those who've acquired wealth by, shall we say, less worthwhile means, perhaps people who've, I can think of many other ways in which wealth is accumulated, but none of them as admirable as entrepreneurship. Would you agree with that?
Look at the, you know, the Forbes list of the richest people in the world. And if you look at this Forbes list, most of them are successful entrepreneurs with great ideas. Look at number one. This is Jeff Bezos, great idea, Amazon. Look, Bill Gates, great idea with Microsoft. Look at Sergey Brin and Larry Page, great idea with Google. Look at Zuckerberg with Facebook.
Stop this. Don't leave out Elon Musk, for heaven's sake.
Yes, a lot of these people. And if you look, all these people are entrepreneurs, with exception, there are some, sure, they inherited the wealth, but in this case, then their father was an entrepreneur and they continued. But what is very important, what people don't know, sometimes I hear, yes, in former times it was possible, self-made, to grow rich and to be as an entrepreneur, but today it's very different. It's absolutely wrong. For United States, there's this Forbes 400 list of the richest people in the world. And they have very interesting research, how many of them were self-made and how many, they call it silver spoons, or inherited their wealth. Yeah. And 1984, only 48% were self-made, 48%. Today it's 67%. So the contrary is right. What people tell us in the past, yes, it was possible. Today, not. No. Today in the internet, and you see all these people I mentioned before, all self-made people. And I think the question was whether there's a difference between entrepreneurship and being rich. I think if you are a successful entrepreneur, you can't do anything against this to grow rich. Yes, and if you are not so successful as an entrepreneur, you will be not so rich. And if you fail as an entrepreneur, you will not get rich. So I think there is a connection because you can only get rich as an entrepreneur if you have a product that is a lot of worth for a lot of people, for so many hundreds of millions of people. And if you do this, automatically you will grow rich.
I would add something to that. You need a society that allows you to do that, that encourages you, that makes it easy, that doesn't have the regulatory structures in place that prevent you doing that. So to some extent, you need sympathetic institutions. So it's up to us, indeed, to make sure we put pressure on our own governments to get those sympathetic institutions, to get that light regulatory touch that allows people who have that entrepreneurial spirit to go ahead and make themselves millionaires.
Sure, absolutely. Yes, there are so, I know it from Germany, it's absolutely crazy. We have so much regulation and bureaucracy and that makes people sometimes really difficult. But having said this, yes, I don't want to tell young people, oh, it's so bad, we have so many regulation and you have no opportunity. First, you have to change the system and then it can become better for you. This is the story that socialists tell always young people, to make them helpless. And, you know, I think it's a very frustrating story. I tell people, sure, there are a lot of problems, yes, but anyway, you can do it if you have, you cannot change the external circumstances, but I think much more important than the external circumstances is your mindset. And if you have the right mindset, even with difficult external circumstances, regulation and so on, you can make your way. And there are so many examples today where people do it. A lot in the United States or in China. I've also in Shenzhen. Yes, so many young people with this entrepreneurial spirit, and they are so hungry. Everyone want to have success, and everyone want to be rich and entrepreneur. It's great in China or in South Korea. Asian people are so hungry, and even there it's possible, in spite of the fact that there's a communist dictatorship and that they have a lot of regulation. But even there, it's possible to have some great stories like Alibaba, founded by Jack Ma, or Tencent, and all these other great stories.
Yeah, let's. Can I ask a little bit about your own mindset? You know, you said you were a Maoist when you were young. Was there a moment, an event, or maybe a book? I mean, who were the principal influences on you? Or was it simply life itself that persuaded you to change your outlook and acquire the pro-entrepreneurial, pro-wealth creating mindset?
Yes, thank you for the question. Sure, it doesn't happen from one day to the other, that one day you're a Maoist, next day you wake up and you're a libertarian. This way, it's a long time. For me, it was maybe like 10 years. I was very early in my life interested in politics. Even with 7 years, yes, I started to be very interested in politics. And then with 13 years, I founded this group, and I gave lectures with 14 years for students about, I read all books from Marx, Engels, Lenin, Stalin, Mao at this time. So I know all of this. And then that it were different. For example, I studied all 3 volumes from the Capital from Karl Marx. Yes? And I read as well the critic from Austrian economy, like Böhm-Bawerk, and I was very confused because I wanted that Marx is right, but I saw there were some arguments. For me, it was very hard to get against it, and I discussed with my other leftists and said, here, this is an argument, this is not easy, and what should we say against it? So, and then happened something when I was at university. I made my first doctoral dissertation. I wrote it about Adolf Hitler, about his economic views, social ideas. And then I saw that he was much more anti-capitalist and socialist than most people think. The book is also in English, but it's a pity you can't buy it today. I have to find something who will reprint it, because in this book I showed it was the first in-depth research about Adolf Hitler's worldview, especially in economic and social. And I saw that all these Marxist theories that fascism is a mean from a capitalist to defend their power and all this is all absolutely wrong. And I think this was very important for me.
If the book isn't in print and available, have you thought of putting it online? That would enable young people to get access to it. I know you wouldn't make any money out of it, but a little philanthropy here and there doesn't do anyone any harm.
Sure.
It's a way of getting young people to understand that Hitler was indeed a socialist, a national socialist.
Yes, no, it's not about money. I even would pay for this. There was published, and if I pay him £6,000 or something like this, I will get the right. But I'm still looking at this. Is the reason I tell you now. I'm still looking to someone who will publish this. I don't want to earn money with this. I have earned enough money with my real estate investments and entrepreneurship. But I hopefully, if I have this message now, someone said, okay, I have here an idea for this.
Excellent. Well, if anyone following this online thinks they might be able to take part in that and perhaps publish this, could you get in touch with the Adam Smith Institute? Just put Rainer Zitelmann, care of Adam Smith Institute. Look up our address on our website and let's see if anything comes from this. Can I ask you a question about your research, Rainer? Because a lot of it involves personal interviews, surveys, polls. I mean, you interviewed all of the entrepreneurs, had in-depth, lengthy interviews with them. This was part of your doctorate, wasn't it? Yes?
Yes, this was my second doctorate. Yes.
Why did you choose that particular method of collecting data to support your case? It's a very idiosyncratic way of doing it.
Yes, because as mentioned before, I'm not so fan of any theories. I'm a fan of facts, yes. Maybe it has something to do with my education as a historian. I always look for facts, and I find them in for example, in this interviews or in this polls. And another thing, when I had these interviews with this very rich people, is what's as well very interesting for me as a person to meet them and to learn something about how they think, not to copy it. This is a misunderstanding. I always tell people, there are so many self-help books about how to get rich and so on. These people look for easy recipes. So here 5 steps, do this, that, and then you will grow rich. And so if you look for something like this, please don't buy my books. Please don't read my books, because you will only be frustrated after you read it. This is only to give people a food of thought about themselves, about their own attitude, about their own personality. And this was the same for me. If I interviewed these people, and I learned a lot. Always when I write a book, it's important for me to learn something for myself, and then after I learned it, I like to teach this to other people.
Now, Rainer, I don't want to accuse you of being unpatriotic, but as a German, don't you get the impression that you often stray into the empirical approach that characterizes thinking in the English tradition, rather than the system-building philosophies that are more common in continental thought? Have you strayed, by mistake into the Anglosphere type of thought, the empirical tradition?
Yes, there was a very funny experience I had some months ago. I wrote an essay about the meaning of implicit learning for entrepreneurship. And, there are always people who have to approve or appraisal about it. Yes, and one of them wrote, it seems very much like Anglo-Saxon or American style, the way it's written. And I said, yes, it's a compliment for me. I won't say anything against it. Maybe that's this way.
Yes, indeed. Are there any continental writers that you would recommend people in the English-speaking world should be reading? The reason I ask that is we do tend to be very, what's the term, Anglocentric, so to speak. I mean, the English-speaking world tends to look inward. Are there any continental writers that people in the Anglo-Saxon English-speaking world should be reading? Are there any you think stand out? Apart from Thomas Piketty, of course.
If I would recommend one book at the moment, it's not from, I recommended one book, but he is German, you know, Christian Niemitz, Socialism, the Failed Idea That Never Dies. And if I would recommend another one, it's not from a German, but it's from a Chinese professor. And it's such a great book. It's the title is The Logic of the Market. And the author is Zhang Wang. I have it in my list of books by the end of The Power of Capitalists. And this is a great book to understand what happened in China, because I think it's very, very important for us to understand what happened in China, because a lot of people have a lot of wrong ideas. For example, they think that the economic success is a result of the state, of planned economy, they will tell you. And this is wrong. I met this author, I met him in Beijing, and he repeated again and again, our economic success was not because of the state, but in spite of the state. And a lot of people don't understand it. They came from, sorry.
I was going to say, and to some extent, it dates from the partial retreat of the state. The economic success comes from the partial retreat of the state, doesn't it?
Absolutely only. They came from 100% state. And sure, even today, the state has a big influence. But the economic progress was only because they introduced private property, introduced free market principles though in their economy. And I met people there in China, and sure, they speak about Karl Marx and so, but in reality, everyone laughs about Karl Marx. I think Karl Marx has more enthusiastic followers in Germany or American universities than they have in China, because people laugh about these ideas of Karl Marx. And I think it's very important to understand it, because I can tell you why. Because it never happened in history that so many people, 800 or 900 million people, came out of poverty in such a short time. It never happened before. And then if we explain it and tell it why it was according to this process, that we understand it, introducing private property and free market principles, and then we have very, very strong argument for our case. But if one day the enemies of capitalism use it, and they say, oh, you see how important it is for a bigger role of the state. This is what we hear sometimes from European politicians today. They said, we have to learn a little bit in China. In China, the state plays such a big role, and we have, and this is the reason. In Germany, a lot of people will tell you, we have to learn something, but they mean the role of the state should be strong. And so I think we should understand, everyone should understand what happened there in China. This is the reason why my book about capitalism started with a chapter about China. And so I learned a lot from this economist, Zhang Wang.
Zhang Wang. And what was his book called?
The Logic of the Market. If you look in the, yes, if you look in the, you can find it in Amazon. It's published by Cato as well as my book.
Would you like to do a short review of that for the Adam Smith blog site?
Yes, after my eye surgery, if I come back. Yes, first after eye surgery. Yes, please remind me. I will do it. Yes.
Look, your views are obviously controversial in the sense that anyone who is pro-neoliberal, pro-capitalist these days is regarded as controversial. Have you ever been publicly attacked for your views? I don't mean physically assaulted. I simply mean by abuse in print or online. You know? Has anyone gone after you in a big way?
Yes, it happened in the beginning of the 90s, because with my book about Hitler, you know what happened always if you have not the leftist ideology, they tell you that you are a fascist and you at whatever. And we have very dangerous leftist people here in Germany, and it was physically. Yes, for example, my car was burned. For
Really?
example, yes, but
Oh.
this happened. Yes, my car, but this happens every day here in Berlin. I think every year some hundred of cars from people who are not leftists. Maybe one is a real estate investor, maybe the other is a right-wing politician, and so it's some hundred of cars burned. Now it's usual. In the media you can't read about it. It's only the local media. Yes, but it's very usual. And for me, it happened very early in 1992 that they burned my car, and there was also a campaign, and it's always the same. Yes, if you are not very left wing, they call you something like far right. And so, and sure, it happened to me. But then there were 15 years where I was more engaged in business and, you know, in my entrepreneurship and investment. This time I published only articles about real estate investment and so. And this time it was not. And now I came back some years, 4 years ago, when I sold my company, and now I'm back here in the scene and I see what will happen.
Do you have any ambitions you have not yet fulfilled?
Sure, absolutely. I told you that I sold my company. I don't have to work anymore. And for 20 years in my life, it was very important to make money and to become rich. But it wasn't important before, and it's not important today, because now I have enough. And what is important for me now, to spread this message, yes, to write these books, and to have my lectures all over the world. And this is, in Germany, it's not in English. There's my autobiography. I published it, and there's a second edition. And the last chapter, the headline is, I want to conquer the world. And this is what I really mean, as to conquer the world. What I mean with this, everywhere, you know, you can see interviews for the Korea. I have my lectures in China. I'm in the United States. Last year I was 6 times in UK. I'm in Switzerland. I'm in Germany. And now I write every week. I write op-ed in French, Le Port, in Italy, in Linkist, and so. And this is what I mean with conquering the world with my books. And it's not only about politics and science like this books we spoke about. You had this book, Dare to be Different and Grow Rich. And I think it's important that we reach as well people who are not so much interested in politics. Otherwise, we are only in our own circle, yes? And I think there are a lot of young people, maybe they're not so interested in politics, but they are not leftists. They, in a way, emotional, maybe they are pro-capitalist, and you can't reach them. Maybe they will not buy my book about capitalism, and definitely they will not buy my book about the rich in public opinion, but maybe they will read a book like this Dare to be Different and Grow Rich. And my most important message is that never blame other people for what happens in your life. This is very important for me. I think this is very important, especially for young people. Don't blame capital society. Don't blame your parents. Don't blame anyone else. It's only on you. Don't see yourself as a victim. I think this is a big problem. Everyone wants to see this with this racism debate now. Everyone wants to be a victim in a minority with this Me Too movement, with this Black Lives Matter movement. So it's all about being a victim. And I said, if people see themselves as a victim, it makes them helpless. You make them really helpless if you tell them you are a victim, you can't do anything against this. First, you have to change the system, and after the system is changed, situation will improve for you. And I think it's so, and I want to have the absolutely different. Everyone is a master of his own, his own fate. And there are so great people, for example, one who I admire very much, it's Stephen Hawking. Yes, it's such a great man. Yes, in my last book, it's not published in English. I look for a publisher.
Yes, he overcame the odds. Yes, which of course is what one admires. I have to say, these ideas. Ayn Rand would have been proud to echo those ideas. It's not up to society. It's not up to the system. It's you yourself.
Yes.
Take your future in hand and do something about it. That's very, very Indian. That's all. Can I ask you, we're getting towards the end here. Do you think that capitalism will adapt and survive? Will it reinvent itself to overcome the criticisms that many people currently make? Is capitalism, has it got a future?
Madsen, I remember very good, we had a dinner one evening in London, and you gave me hope because I was a little bit skeptical what happens now all over the world at this time. It's the contrary what happened in the 80s. In the 80s, we had Maggie Thatcher, we had Ronald Reagan, we had Deng Xiaoping, then we had the reforms in Sweden, then we had in Germany with Gerhard Schröder. Now it's the other way around, yes? And you said this one thing, there will always be any place in the world, there will be maybe only one little country or something, and they will have capitalism and they will show that it is successful. And I remember always what you told me about it. If you analyze what happens today, yes, you have not so much reason to be optimistic, because I think the financial crisis is not over. We are in the middle of the financial crisis. Some people tell it's something like it happened in the past, but this is crazy. It's if you see this zero interest policy of the Federal Reserve and of the European Central Bank and all this, yes, if you would put this away, the zero interest and all this quantitative easing policy, yes, then we would get from one day to another in very, very big problems. And the one cause of the crisis was too much debt, and now we have more than we had ever before. What happened yesterday, yes, here in European Union with always hundreds of billions and billions and billions, and I think it will not have a good end. And if something bad happens, they will blame capitalism. They will say, you see, this is capitalism, what happened, yes? And so I have to, my personal mentality is more to be optimist, yes? And so if I wouldn't be an optimist, I wouldn't write my books, I wouldn't have these interviews, I would write my things. But if I have a more cold-hearted analysis what happens now, I'm more skeptical. But then I think always what you told me at this one dinner, and this gives me hope.
Okay, look, we're drawing to the end. Andrew Sutcliffe has sent us some very helpful information. He says that book, The Logic of the Market by, is it Wei Zhang?
Zhang Wang.
Zhang Wang. It's available on a Kindle edition at £6.49 if anyone wants to buy it. So,
yes.
Look, I thank you so much. This has been an absolutely brilliant session. You've been very generous with your time. I do hope your forthcoming eye surgery is successful, because we need you around. We need you giving more lectures, writing more books. Thank you so much. Now, I thank our followers for coming along, and I remind you that we're going to have a webinar next Tuesday. It will be conducted by John MacDonald, and it will be on the subject of cancel culture. That will be at the same time, starting at 6 o'clock next Tuesday. So thanking you all and thanking our speaker once again. I bid you all good night.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Thank you very much, Mats.